on, everybody? How we doing today? Welcome back to another episode of Mass Rider. Today is episode 2 of Camping Out on the Land, and we have a lot of fun today. I go to a powwow later on, which you will see at the end of the clip, and I end up going and hitting the trails this early morning. It is about 6:40 this morning. I got up pretty early. Everybody's still sleeping. I wanted to go hit the trails and enjoy myself a little bit more on my WR before we end up leaving for the day and going to the powwow. So bad news, I do end up killing a squirrel today, so it gets kind of graphic later on. If you do have kids, make sure they're not watching that part unless you don't care about it. But I end up hitting a squirrel in the head because I don't want it to sit there and suffer after I run it over. So that happens, and now it is time for a little bit of a history lesson. So let's get into it and get started. A very long time ago, Englishmen came to a land that we are now living on till this day, that history has taught us was found by the English, when the truth was that Native Americans were the first ones on the land thousands of years before. The Native Americans were living in wigwams that could house a small family with no more than they can carry, since they were constantly on the move. When the English came, Native Americans thought they were gods and took them in with open arms, teaching them how to live off the land and survive, which the English were very thankful for, since they were sick and starving. The English started to make a living and started to thrive off of learning from the Native Americans. More and more English came to the land, and the more and more they started to not need the Native Americans. In 1620, there was a feast and celebration in thanks of the Native Americans that went on for 3 days. That is now called Thanksgiving today. That same day, if you guys did not know, is the day that the English also decided to rape, slaughter, and kill hundreds of men, women, and children in Connecticut for their land. After the Thanksgiving killing, the Native Americans would fight and raid the English, trying to get back their land and some kind of dignity. But they lost because the English were too many. The Native Americans were forced into hiding, and some changed their names, left to other land like Charlestown, Rhode Island. Springfield, Mass. Was burned to the ground, and many Native Americans sold into slavery. Things calmed down, but not all the way. Some Native Americans were treated like savages and animals like you see in the movies, and some were treated okay because they fit in. Eventually, the English did end up starting to pay the Native Americans back, but it was only about $6 for acres and acres of their land. If the Native Americans said no, then it just didn't matter. They did it anyways. They would take their land and do whatever they wanted to do with it because they could, because they were more powerful, the English. So eventually the Native Americans just ended up going about their own way. They couldn't vote, they had no say, so they had to change their name from Native American to African American so they could use their voice and be heard and actually have some kind of rights in this world. Now everything has basically gotten back to normal. There's powwows every weekend. We can share our culture with everybody. I'm starting to learn a lot about the culture and enjoying learning about my ancestors. So if you remember in my last video, I was telling you guys that I was putting my ethnicity wrong on my applications all this time. Well, that is why. I hope that helped you guys out with a little bit of a catch up on the history of what really happened. Native Americans were here first, thousands of years before, and it was a slaughter at Thanksgiving. So, lesson over. Let's get back to riding. From here on out, I think I'll give you guys some updates on what's going on with the land, fill you guys in on stuff that is going to be happening and going on. So hopefully these land videos are going to be a little bit of fun for you guys and enjoy what's going on with my life on this land and being in a tribe. So coming up pretty soon is going to be that killing of the squirrel. I'm sorry that I killed the squirrel, but things happen. I do end up running it over and hitting it in the head, so that's going to be coming up pretty soon. So get your kid if you do not want them to see this next part. Thank you. Right here is when I end up hitting this squirrel. This thing comes and turns right back into my path. Like, come on, man. I hate when squirrels do that. They do that all the time. I felt bad. It was still alive. I decided to take it and put it out of its misery. Sorry. There are a lot of coyotes out here, so this thing will get eaten up pretty quick, I'm sure. You know, life cycle. Everything eats everything. I didn't want to eat squirrel myself. I'm not a real big fan of eating squirrel, so, you know, I know people that are, but yeah, I think I'm good. So that's the first thing I ever hit with my WR so far was that squirrel, and hopefully I don't hit anything else, because that just sucks. I hate hitting animals. It just really is nasty and annoying. But I will be going and hitting these trails just for a little bit longer. I'm actually on my way to go hit up the railroad tracks and go to a different section of trails on the power line that I found. And when I come back out here, hopefully I'll hit the power lines a little bit more next time. My first time ever being on the railroad with my WR250R, and it was a lot of fun. I had a good time. This is an active line too. There are trains that go by this, I think, twice a day. I thought, but I haven't really heard one, so maybe not as often. But we are going to be passing the campsite pretty soon and then heading to the power lines to check it out. Alright, finally we made it to the power lines, and there's a nice little trail system right to the left. Over to the right there's a horse farm that's actually all on our property. We're gonna figure out all this stuff eventually and see what the deal is with getting grants and all that fun stuff. So hopefully everything will work out for us. Here I go, hitting the trails, gonna do it just for a little bit, then I end up turning around and going to go to the powwow. So hope you enjoy, let's have some fun. So this is when it gets real thin up here and I end up turning around. Maybe I'll come check this place out a little bit later when I have some more time. But now it's time to head back and go to the powwow. watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video today. I definitely had a great time making it. So make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I'll talk to you later.